Okay, so this is a tutorial on how to make an homemade alcoholic beverage. You can use anything you want as long as it's not carbonated. If it's carbonated like a soda or a energy drink or anything with carbonation, that won't work. The only way you can use soda or stuff like that is if you decarbonate it. So whether that be pouring it into a big container and mixing it until all the carbonation is out and it's flat, or shaking it up and pouring it out and shaking it up, however you want to decarbonate it, then it would work. But it doesn't work just straight out of the bottle. So what I've got here, we're doing a tea, an alcoholic tea. So we've got green tea and decaffeinated. Another thing that will kill the yeast is caffeination. So you have to get decaffeinated stuff. Then we have like a whispering wildflower, like herbal tea. We have another green tea, and then we have an Earl Grey decaffeinated black tea. So just a mixture of teas. I think it'll taste pretty good. I've mixed those teas before just making tea, so I know that it'll taste good. But it's been sitting here dissolving for a while, probably a couple hours. I just want every single flavor out of that tea bag. So ingredients, what I use and what works really good, just out of the box, making something, it'll produce about 20% alcohol. If you freeze distill it, it gets higher, because when alcohol is a low or a higher freezing rate temperature than like water and stuff. So if you pour it into, or you take the jug or however you want to do it, and you put it in the freezer, and then wait till it gets solid with ice, and then you pour whatever's left out, that's basically just the pure alcohol. So you can get a higher concentration, not the pure alcohol, but whatever's in the mixture you have, or whatever you're using that has a higher temp rate for freezing. So alcohol, some like dyes and stuff like that, but the flavor will be there. So when I do that, I usually double freeze distill it, or you can use a distiller and you can make some pretty nice vodka with it. So the ingredients that we have that I use and found great success with, I've got some brewing. This is more tea, and this is how it starts to look. But then when you put the yeast in and it starts brewing, it turns this color. But you can filter the color out mostly, because that's just the yeast breaking this stuff down, the ingredients that I'm going to show you. But you can see every bubble is carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is, there's two things that yeast produce when they eat sugars, is alcohol and, well, ethanol and carbon dioxide. So when you see bubbles like this, you know the yeast are working and they're producing the alcohol you want in your drink, which is happening on both of these. So back to our ingredients list. You're going to need sugar. The second ingredient that I have is this pectic enzyme. This mainly is used when you're using grapes or actual fruits to make like a wine or a alcoholic beverage. But I find even just with a juice, it helps give bring the tannins out and the mouth flavor of whatever you're trying to get to produce. So there's that. You're going to want to get that. Another thing you want to get, yeast energizer. This, especially if you're using a turbo yeast or like a wine or beer yeast, you're going to want to get this. It will make the yeast just go crazy. Like, look at this. Look how fast they're making that stuff. And so you'll cut the time to make the drink in half if you use this stuff. Basically, it's just a bunch of stuff that yeast that they eat also along with the sugar to make the alcohol. Okay. Another thing you're gonna want to get, yeast nutrient. This is very important. If you don't have this, there's a chance your yeast can die, and then you'll have just a failed gallon of whatever you're making, or however much you want. You got to put this in there. A lot of guys say you don't have to, but I've experimented with this, and if you don't have yeast nutrient, you'll get like half the percentage of alcohol, because the yeast just end up dying. It's like with you, a human, if you just drink water all the time, but you don't eat food. So you'll still live, but you're just going to be skin and bones and eventually just die. So yeast nutrient, very important. Another thing I like to get is potassium bicarbonate. So what this does, you can also use baking soda. It's the same thing basically, but this is very specific to brewing. But what this does is it makes the pH not acidic. So yeast don't like acidic things. So a lot of the juices, and this will be pH balanced because it's just water and tea. But like say you use like a Welch's juice or a fruit punch or something, a lot of that stuff is very acidic. And acid and yeast do not go together. It's the same thing with the nutrient. If you don't have that, they die. If you have acidic water or acidic juice or whatever it is, they will die. So you put some of that in there and it makes the pH more basic instead of acidic, and they live and survive and make your alcohol. Alright, so we have our base. It's just a tea water. Smells like tea water. So you could technically heat this up and just it'd be tea, but we want an alcoholic tea. I noticed a lot of the trends right now are alcoholic teas. Like you got the Voodoo Ranger tea, Arizona hard tea, Arizona hard green tea, stuff like that. So I just thought I'd try it. So we got our tea base. What we're gonna do now is add the sugar. So I just got some granulated sugar here. Let me just measure it out here so I know. Yep. So this is about how much you want. Let me show you. So you're going to want to put this much sugar in. About half a cup. Okay, you see that? Alright. So you're going to pour this in here like this.
Hopefully this works, because I usually use the bag, but this will work.
Here we go. Now you're going to get your cap. And you're going to shake it until all the sugar is dissolved. This is just kind of warm water right now, so it should dissolve pretty good. If it doesn't dissolve, heat your water up. That looks pretty good. It's all dissolved in there. Now, right now I can tell you this is too much, because I forgot one ingredient. You're going to need a bubbler like this. It's not really an ingredient, but it's a tool you need. So if I put this in here right now like that, and I put all the other ingredients that we need, it's going to come up to about right here. And you got to realize whenever the yeast does their stuff and makes the alcohol, it raises the pressure and the measuring line of where your fluid is. And then what ends up happening is if you're up to here and the yeast do their thing and it raises, you get a bunch of nasty stuff up in here and it starts bubbling out the top. And once you get good enough, you can usually tell about how much water you need to put in there. I just accidentally put too much, so I'm just going to pour a little out since we haven't put the yeast in yet or anything like that. This is about where your level should be at the end of the day. You should be just above, like if you're using like a container like this as a wrapper, you should just be slightly above the wrapper, okay? Now, next step, we have our sugary water. What we're going to put in next is the pectic enzyme. This makes, like I said, makes the tannins in like grapes real nice and like mouthfeely. But I just find that with like grape juice or anything that you use, it just enhances the flavor. So I'm going to use this. And basically, you just want to put just a little bit in there like that. Just a tiny, tiny bit, just like that. Just a couple pours of the tannin. And then you're going to shake it up again, the same. To dissolve the pectic enzyme in there.
So everything is equally balanced.
Okay, so next we're going to add the yeast energizer. Same thing like with the pectic enzyme. You just kind of pour a little bit in there. I'm sure there's people are going to watch this video. They're going to be like, bro, you need to use a measuring cup and specifically put this much, like a half a tablespoon and half a teaspoon of this. It doesn't matter. Okay, I've been making this for years. It does not matter. You just put what you think is right. So just a little bit like that. And then you repeat the process. Okay. Now we're going to put our potassium bicarbonate in. This is mainly just water, but I'm just going to put a little bit in because I don't know the pH of it. There are pH testers that you can get, and you want to be on the more basic side, but just to be safe, it doesn't hurt anything to put a little of this in there just in case it is a little acidic with the teas. So I'm going to just put just a little bit, a couple grains in there just to be safe. Because the last thing we want is an acidic mixture, acidic base that our yeast are going to die in. Because if yeast die in your mixture, it makes a really, really bad flavor. So you don't want that. Okay, so now we're up that high. See how it's been raising since we put stuff in? That's why you got to have a perfect mixture of water to base ratio. Okay, next is the yeast nutrient. So we're putting our yeast nutrient in. Same thing with everything else. All these ingredients, you just kind of go off your gut. So yeast nutrient, we're just going to go about like that. Like a 2 or 3 second pour. Okay? Because they're literally excreting alcohol as their byproduct. Alright. Now, the very most important part. The yeast. I use the Alcobase Extreme Turbo yeast. However, you can use, if you don't want to order this, you have to order this. You can't just pick it up anywhere. I ordered this. It's for wine and beer making. It just basically, the yeast have a longer lifespan through higher alcohol content. So normal yeast like this, just normal you can get at the grocery store, they will die. The alcohol they produce will literally kill them at about 8 to 10%. Okay? This turbo yeast that I bought can survive up to like 20%. So they'll make between 15 and 20% alcohol, and then they die from the alcohol because the alcohol literally kills them that they produce. So if you want like an 8 to 10% drink without this, like before the distilling process and all that, you just go to the store and pick up some active dry. Don't get the fast rise. That does not work. You have to get the active dry yeast, original. If you want to do it like homemade style without ordering stuff. You have to order all that stuff anyway, so you might as well just order the active turbo yeast. But if you just want it like a normal baker's yeast, you can use that. So what you're going to do with the yeast is the same with everything else. You're just going to pour until you think it's about right in comparison to what we have. So that's about good. You want about, I don't know, a 1/4 pour to ratio. So I just did like a 3 second pour for how much we have here. Putting too much is not a big deal with yeast. Too little is a big deal because then there's not enough yeast cells to actually get all the sugars. But putting too much is not a big deal because eventually they'll all just eat all the sugars and produce alcohol and they all die anyway. So now, like I said, you just give her a shake. You want to make sure that it's well spread out because the yeast are heavy and they'll eventually just settle at the bottom and then they can't eat anything up here. So you want to spread them out so that while they're floating around, they can eat the sugars and the enzymes and the nutrients. Is when it stops bubbling and you have a film layer on the bottom of just this white looking stuff, which is all the yeast cells dead, fell to the ground, to the bottom of the bottle here, and everything else that just naturally, everything but alcohol and water or juice or whatever you're using falls. Gravity does its thing, it falls to the bottom. So you'll have this film. And I do have one somewhere, I can't remember where I put it, but there are pumps that you can drop in the hose just above that nasty stuff at the bottom, just above it, that you can pump everything out except that. What I do, because I don't care, is just pour before the stuff starts coming out. Then I stop, and then I put this stuff through a filter, fabric filter, into my bottle, so it filters. If anything of this stuff got out, it filters it out. So you just have your pure base with the alcohol in it. Okay, so now our yeast literally right now, I can feel it's bubbling up. Literally right now it is activating. It is making alcohol as we speak. So you got to order. I think I ordered 6 of these, or it comes in a pack of 6 or 10 or something like that, because generally what you want to do is have like 4 or 5 bottles run at the same time. But you're going to want to have a bunch of these. You can't just get one, because once you figure out how good this stuff is, you're going to want to make more. And if you just have one, you can't make a bunch of them. Now you're going to take your bubbler and you're going to fill it halfway with water and make sure it's equal. You might have to do this until it's equal, about halfway. And what this does is it prevents bugs and things from getting into your mixture, or bacteria or any viruses or anything that's in the air that will kill the yeast. This prevents it. It's like a P-trap on your faucet. Water will prevent things from getting in. Okay, so you're going to put your bubbler right in there like that. Make sure it's nice and snug. It has a good seal. And then what you're going to want to do is put it in a nice air-conditioned, dry, slightly warm but not too cold, not too hot location. So for me, I set my thermostat, what's it say right now? It's 68 degrees right now. I'm probably going to have to bump that up a little bit because it was kind of warm today. I'm going to bump it up to like 72. So you're going to keep it between like 75 and 69 degrees, wherever you put this. Don't put it in the fridge. Don't put it in the freezer. Don't put it outside during winter or summer, because yeast, to make alcohol, they love between 75 and 69 degrees. Okay? So I just put them in my cabinets, because the cabinets are pretty well insulated. So whatever temperature it is in here, it'll stay in there. So I put them in my cabinets and wait until it stops bubbling. And then once it stops bubbling, that you can see actively, wait 2 more days. Then you can take the bubbler off, get you a filter or a fabric filter or some type of filter, and you're going to pour, unless you want to get the pump, but you're going to pour through a filter into a jar or a glass or whatever you want to store this in. And you're gonna pour it through the filter, and if you have a nice enough filter, it'll just slowly run until you fill it up and it's empty. But don't pour. Stop before you get to the nasty stuff on the bottom, because you're just gonna wash that out. That's all the dead stuff. And then once you filter it, I usually double filter it. So you're gonna filter it again through the same process. Then once you do that, you can either put it in the fridge and cool it and drink it how you like, or if you want it stronger, you can put the jars or whatever you put it in, make sure it has a cap, put it in the freezer. Throw it in the freezer and wait till it looks frozen solid. Usually takes about a day. And then you take it out and you take another jar and you pour whatever comes out that's not frozen into your jar. And then that's basically a really concentrated version of what you made. So if, say, you make a 15% normal, it'll be about maybe double to almost a little bit above double. So it'd be like, if it's 15, it'll be like 30 or 35% alcohol as like a shot. And then you'll have just a stronger version and flavor of whatever you made, which I do sometimes as like little shots. And according to people I've given it to, it's pretty strong. If you have an air distiller or a heated distiller, that is a little more efficient. It gets rid of the color. It just comes out clear. And I've made up to, I think, if I triple distill it, I think I've made up to like 96%. So almost like close to Everclear percentage. off, and it tastes just like whatever you made. So if say you use grape juice and you put it through the distiller and you triple distill it, so basically you distill it once and then you put it back in there. You gotta have enough though. You gotta have like, I think I was using a 5-gallon jar or something, and I poured grape juice, did the whole everything I talked about, and then I triple distilled it. So you distill it and then you have about half, and you distill it again, then you have another half, and you distill it again, and then you have another half of that. So you end up having just like maybe a bottle's worth of just pure alcohol flavored like whatever you made it off of. There's a specific temperature that alcohol boils at and condensates at, which is how a distiller works. But I will say that if you use that method, the first 2 runs, they call it, the first 2 runs you get to pour out, because that's methanol, which they also produce, the yeast. Methanol is very poisonous and dangerous to humans. Don't drink it. Now, the first 2 runs that you do, which I'd say are, depending on how much you put in there and what size distiller you have, I usually just like, I would say probably one between half and 1 cup twice, and then you can start keeping what they call the heads. Now, the heads are your first flavors that come through the distiller, because ethanol, aka alcohol, has, based on your mixture, has different flavors based on different temperatures. So when your distiller rises to a certain temperature where the methanol will start boiling out and condensating, you throw that out, and then it gets to a higher temperature where the first heads of the ethanol start condensating and boiling out. That's what's called your heads, and it's usually a really bitter taste, and you usually just keep that as spare. You usually just throw out the heads because they're nasty. Then you have the mains, which are at a certain temperature higher. That is what you usually keep, and you can run, depending on how, like I say, how big your distiller is and how much you're distilling. You might go through, I don't know, 3 cups of it before you get to the tails. So you have the heads, the mains, the tails. Tails usually always, in my experience, taste like wet dog fur. You're going to want to throw that out. You don't even try to save that. The tails are tails for a reason. They're nasty. You throw that out. So the heads and the mains are what you keep, and you can experiment with mixing a certain mixture, or if you just like the mains, you can keep it, or if you think it'd be better with a slightly bitter head taste, you throw that all in there. You can experiment all you want. There's tons of videos about that. But in my experience, I just like the mains. So that's what I usually keep if I do an air distiller. Actually, it is faster to do a freeze distill, if I'm thinking about it, because you got to wait until you fill a whole cup up, and it's just literally drops. Drip, drip, until you fill like half a cup up to a full cup, depending on how much you distilled. And then you pour it out, or keep it if you want to mix it, and then you got to wait for the mains to come. And then you usually take about 3 cups of the mains and keep, and then you gotta wait for the tails to come. And the tails are the nasty stuff, and you can tell the tails by the smell. The smell is just, it's horrendous. And you don't even have to wait for the tails. You can just stop and throw the rest out, because what's gonna be left in the distiller is just a nasty sludge, because you're taking all the ethanol and methanol and everything else that makes it liquid out. So there's just going to be like a nasty sludge in there. You're going to want to clean that really good, because if you don't, and you leave it in there and forget about it, and then you remember and you open it, I'm telling you, it is going to be the worst smell you've ever smelled in your whole life. So anyway, that's how you do it. There's your tutorial. Catch me later. One more thing. You're going to want to keep your yeast sealed tight with like a clip or something, and keep it in the fridge, because if you keep it out, they'll die once it's opened. So clip it tight, keep it in the fridge, and the use time is usually about like a month. So you gotta use, depending on what size you have, you gotta use it once you open it within a month or so, depending on what yeast you buy. So that's a tip.